that village in Beit Daras. Actually, my grandfather was a very poor man. Like most of the of the people and the dwellers of most of the Palestinian villages, all 518 of them that were destroyed in 47, 48. He was a very poor man. He had no land whatsoever, actually. And then he kind of took upon himself to learn a skill, and he became a basket weaver. And that kind of took him about in the southern part of Palestine. He traveled up to Jaffa and Haifa and Nakab, Jerusalem, Hebron. He would take his donkey and his baskets, and he would go there, and he would try to sell his baskets and come back to Beit Daras. At one point, just shortly before the Nakba took place, he actually had enough money to buy a small plot of land. So that's what is our kind of shareholding in Beit Daras, in pre-Nakba Palestine, that tiny little piece of land. And of course it meant the world to him, because in Palestine, land meant status. You're a landowner, no matter how small or big. And you aspire to have more and more land and work hard in the land, and it becomes yours. But it also becomes part of your identity as well. So shortly after he actually bought that piece of land, the war started, and Beit Daras was under attack. Now the people of Beit Daras were known of being very stubborn people. I mean, really stubborn, that the other villagers nearby, they would watch for these guys. Don't mess with the people from that village. They started the stereotypes about us, that we had large heads, literally, and that was something that I had, I was teased about growing up in a refugee camp. Oh, you are from Beit Daras, your people have large heads. But it actually turned out that it's not that we had large heads as per size, but we had large heads in the sense, in Arab culture, having large head means you are hard-headed, you are very stubborn. So the people of Beit Daras, when they fought the Zionist militias, they were really fighting at two fronts. They were fighting as Palestinians, but they were fighting as the people of Beit Daras. And it was really as simple as that. It's a very simple story. This discourse has been kind of being written and rewritten for over the course of 62 years, and we at times it becomes kind of boring. We need to find a new language. So we complicate things. And we reach a point that we can't even remember how simple that story actually is. And for the people of Beit Daras and those who have survived from that village, it remains that simple of a story. That's my land, and you took it from me, and I want it back. It's as simple as that. But it's not my land in the material sense. And that's why I thought it's important that I emphasize that I do not come from a wealthy landowner family. But land in terms of shaping Palestinian identity. So my grandfather, after he was pushed off his land, went and he lived in a refugee camp in the Gaza Strip. And it's like the man has really never been removed from his land. I mean, he talked about Beit Daras, he breathed Beit Daras, he dreamed about Beit Daras. He had the habit of, he had an old radio transistor, and I spoke about this in the book, because that radio transistor was something that was perhaps the closest friend to my grandfather. I think initially it was red. That's what because there are few red spots left on that old radio transistor. Over time it turned into other colors. He had it forever. And you could also, the batteries are bulking in the back and they are taped repeatedly. And that radio transistor kind of represented his connection to Beit Daras. He was under the impression, now my grandfather in his own age and time, he was considered a learned man. He was the imam of the local mosque. But again, the post-Nakba Palestine presented all sorts of new challenges that for a man his age and his background, he couldn't really cope. He couldn't really understand, so he kind of remained fixed and fixated on that specific time and place, if you will. He was actually under the impression that at one particular point there's going to be an announcement on that radio transistor that says, people of Beit Daras, not Palestinian refugees, not all Palestinian people everywhere, no, people of Beit Daras, go back to your village. And he strongly believed in that, and he would be turning the radio transistor on day and night. It would be muted at times where he takes his naps, but it's always on. And at one point he landed, he kind of trusted in various Arab channels, like the Sawt al-Arab, the Voice of the Arabs that comes from Cairo. After the defeat of 1967, he kind of disowned that entire, and he started listening to Monte Carlo, then London, and then he died. And one thing that one of my uncles, one of my youngest uncles used to kind of, the trick he used to play on him, my grandfather would be in the bathroom, would be somewhere, and he would scream, Dad, they are saying something about Bid Daras on the radio. And then he would have, Grandpa just running, and every time he would trick him to, and he actually does believe that something is being said about Bid Daras, and he would come and he would listen, and then there's nothing. And then he would start swearing at his son. So he actually lived that entire phase in his life believing that it is very possible for them to go back to Bid Daras. One of the arguments he always had with Grandma was over the blankets. And as a little child, I never really understood why are they having this argument. Why are they always fighting over old and new blankets? So here's perhaps a little snippet that could explain the blankets argument. Why bother to haul the good blankets on the back of a donkey, exposing them to the dust of the journey? Well, we know that it's a matter of a week or so before we return to Bid Daras, he told his bewildered wife Zainab. Many years later, Grandma Zainab would repeat the story with a chuckle, as Grandpa Muhammad would shake his head with an awkward mix of embarrassment and grief. So actually what it turned out, that the blankets, when the Zionist militias attacked Bid Daras, they kind of rushed into their homes, and they've decided they've got to give up the fight. The Arabs are not coming, it's over, we need to move, we need to try to salvage what can be salvaged. And they had 5 children, 4 boys and a girl at the time. So when they went inside the house, and they have decided what could we carry on the back of the donkey, Grandpa wanted to keep the new blankets because he believed, as a worldly man, that the international community, the world, is not going to allow this to happen to us. We are going to come back in a matter of a week, 2, a month top, but we're not going to be, living in refugee camps until we die. That is just completely out of the picture. So he insisted but to leave the new blankets back in Bid Daras, while Grandma, a very pragmatic woman, she wanted to take the new blankets with her. And of course, Grandpa lost the argument because they never recovered their homes in Bid Daras, and they never recovered the blankets either. So that was always a winning point that Grandma had over Grandpa, the issue of the blankets. Now, my father lived in Bid Daras until he was about 10 years old. And he really didn't experience what the older generation at the time experienced. He didn't understand a great deal what is that British police station that is separating the Jewish settlement, the Zionist settlement of Taibeh, and Bid Daras. What was its function? For example, he tells me that they've learned 2 words from the British at the time, 2 words in the English language, and both of them were swear words. And naturally, what happened is that the British police would come to the village. Sometimes they would come to the aid of the Zionist settlers whenever there's a clash. And then they would be swearing at the kids. And as a child, he kind of remembered these 2 swear words, and that's all that he remembered from the British presence in Palestine at the time. And I think that's kind of telling in a way. Anyway, but at the end of the day, he found himself, along with his family, just kind of going somewhere, random, really. They had no idea where they were going. I mean, it was a haphazard choice that had to be made, and had to be made instantly. Are we going to go north to Lebanon and Syria? Are we going to go south to Gaza and Egypt? Are we going to go to Jordan, to the Negev? Or, like many others, are we going to go to Haifa and take a boat somewhere? And by the way, many of the people who took boats died, and because their boats sunk, because of the so many people who were trying to escape all at the same time. So it was this kind of decision that had to be made, and they chose to go south, not really knowing exactly where they are going to end and where they are going to land, along with hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, of course. So Grandpa Muhammad mounted his faithful donkey with a few of the family's belongings and young daughter Maryam. Ibrahim was in his mother's arms. Ahmed walked alongside his father, and my father Muhammad, barefoot and confused, trotted behind. It was another trail of tears of sorts. Neither parent had answers to the children's incessant questions. Where are we going? They headed south. That was all they knew. First to Asdod, then to Hamami, then to Gaza. Everywhere they settled, they were chased with mortars and airplanes and bombs. As the bombardments progressed and more villages were razed, the roads became more and more populated, some people carrying on with a great sense of urgency, others wandering aimlessly in a daze. Now at that point, Muhammad actually gets lost on the journey from Beit Daras to Gaza, and I'm not going to read that particular part right now. But here you have the refugees in Gaza, barely trying to survive. There was really no political agenda. There was no leadership. There was nothing. There was this vacuum in which there are about 200 plus thousands of refugees in a place that was already poor, that is the Gaza Strip, with very little prospects by way of economy or anything. And nobody came to their rescue except some volunteers from the Quakers and few others from some Islamic organizations, but there was nobody else. So you kind of really had to deal with real human catastrophe then. And it was that very catastrophe that really defined the relationship between Gaza and its new refugees. And there's one interesting thing that I want to mention here, is that we never really had strong bond to Gaza as a Palestinian, as a refugee. I never really looked at Gaza as this is my home. I mean, Gazans defend Gaza because that's what they do. They resist. But our connection was really never to that specific place. Our connection was to the villages from which we came. You would ask any Palestinian, at least from my generation still, things might be changing a bit after Oslo. But if you ask a Palestinian from where are you from? He's not going to tell you I am from this refugee camp. He's going to tell you I am from this village. I tell you I am from Beit Daras, even though I've never seen my village. And most of these villages were so we had this really curious relationship to Gaza. We did not over-romanticize Gaza. We romanticized the places we came from. So Gaza was kind of a station, more or less, a station for Palestinian resistance, a station for a Palestinian collective shaping and forming its identity over the years. So that collective, that 200,000 people, who are today's 1.5 million people, have been through so many different stations and so many different changes in their character as a mass, as collective. And the ability to be politically articulate and to have demands and be aware of what their rights are and to be so stubborn about defending themselves and their homes and their families. That whole has also changed throughout the years. And I tried as much as I could to actually explain how all these changes came about and all the way leading to Hamas's presence in Gaza and the socialist movements in Gaza and so forth and so on. I guess one major point that I really tried to make in the book is that the Gaza discussion and the Palestine discussion in general